Welcome to Ty and That Guy. I'm Wes Chatham, aka Midnight, and this is my good friend, or reasonably acquaintance. His name is Ty Franck, aka Ty Franck.
I thought my AKA was Sexy Pants. Did we change that?
Sexy pants. Hey, did I ever tell you my this? I don't know why I said midnight. That's like 20 years in the past. But did I ever tell you my midnight story? Why all my buddies that call me Midnight where I grew up?
No.
Well, so I'm a big believer, and I've learned this, and I've evolved a lot in the past, and through a lot of therapy and hugs and kisses. But I think that you have to embrace your pain, right? So it was my first year playing football, and it was that awkward year, sixth grade year, the hardest year of anybody's life. And I show up, and I'm and I'm playing, Lawrenceville, Georgia. I'm playing, my first year of football, super excited. But all of these kids have known each other since they were able to walk. They've been playing football together. So they had all these friend groups, and everybody was way more experienced and knew the game better than I did. And so I remember my first year, the coach was saying, so we had our first day of practice, and he says, okay, the next day, take a piece of tape, put it over your helmet, and put your name on it, so then we know who you are with these helmets. And he said it at the time. I didn't know at the time, but he said it as joking. He goes, or you put a nickname or something on the on the helmet, and that's what I heard. And so at the time, because two things that I want you to know about me, Ty, my head, my lips, and my feet were adult size. When I was young, they grew to adult size like when I was 3, and everything else was super. I was a late bloomer, so I was really small, but I had this massive head, lips, and feet, and it looked like Charlie Brown, like out there. And I tried, like, when I'd run, if my head got too far ahead, I'd have to speed up to catch up. But then it would get too back, and then I had to run forward. So anyway, I had a lot of things I had to deal with growing up. So cut to, I go home, the whole ride home, I'm like, all right, what nickname am I going to create that will strike fear in the heart of these other sixth grade kids? I'm going to be the baddest dude on. So I go home, and for whatever reason on TV, there was, I don't know if it was a rodeo or whatever, but there was a horse there, and it was like the most feared horse of everybody that tried to ride. It was the meanest horse that they had, and it bugged people off. And the horse was called Midnight. And I'm like, that's it. So I put Midnight on my helmet. So I show up the next day, and I'm from the other side of the tracks than a lot of these kids, and I definitely wanted to fit in. But I show up the next day, and I got Midnight on my helmet, and I'm fired the fuck up, and I'm gonna lay some people out with my gigantic head and my big feet and my big lips. So I show up, and we're doing our stretches and we're doing our warm-ups to get ready. And as I'm walking in and putting on my helmet, I'm looking around, and nobody has a nickname on their helmet. It's all their like legit last names on their helmet. And I'm like, oh, he was kidding about that. And so then we were doing stretches, and I was like just slowly trying to claw it off like as hard as I could. And so then we were doing stretches, and we're laying down, and the coach was walking over us, and he was saying, hey, Jonte, hey, Hank, saying everybody's name. And he came through, and he goes, Midnight? What the hell is Midnight? And I was like, and he goes, what the hell is Midnight? And I was like, I thought you said nicknames, and I wanted to have, and so from that point forward, everybody that I grew up, all my buddies, they all have called me Midnight. And I used to be embarrassed about it, but fuck it, I'm Midnight.
The best thing about that story is, if you had been watching a different rodeo, your nickname could be like Black Beauty.
The amount of nicknames that I could have had, and just fate just brought Midnight to me in my well, fuck it. But eventually my body caught up with my head, and then, and then I showed all those motherfuckers, fuck you.
Anytime you give yourself a nickname, that's
Ty, I thought that the coach told us to go get nicknames. Like, have a little bit of pity and empathy for the 6-year-old me. Jesus Christ. And I agree with you.
Because everybody's an idiot when they're in 6th grade.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Yes.
There's no dumber person that has ever lived than me in like middle school.
Right. Right.
So I totally get it.
Oh, thank you. I needed that. I needed that from you. And that's what I was telling the story for. I needed that empathy. I had a roommate once when I was in college, and we would play Halo, the game Halo, and like you would have your name on the bottom of it. And he's like, yeah, you know, people call me Hef, like Hugh Hefner, like his name was Hef. And I was like, no, that's not gonna happen. You're not gonna name yourself fucking Hef, and nobody will call you Hef as long as I'm around. And goddamn you for giving yourself your own nickname, and especially one like Hef. I mean, come on. Anyway, so I started this new thing, and I'm pretty sure I'm alone in this, where I wanna mention something cool or current that we're watching or reading or whatever right now. And my thing today is Mark Harris's the biography on Mike Nichols, and it just came out. It came out last week, and I'm really deep into it, and I'm really enjoying it. And Mark Harris, he's got a knack for really understanding Hollywood and understanding politics and the drama and the behind the scenes. But he also, one of the things I like about Mark Harris is he includes, or he really understands the technique, the craft of filmmaking, and you know, the acting and all the stuff that makes good films. And so, and the politics surrounding it, how do things get made? And so he's really good at that. And Mike Nichols, I think, is one of the greats. You know, he directed Carnal Knowledge, he directed The Graduate, he directed Closer, you know, the list goes on. And he was also a superstar theater director. He did Barefoot in the Park, he did The Odd Couple, he did a lot of, you know, really great things. But what's fascinating about this book is I was unaware of how much Mike Nichols struggled and suffered, and he was a radio personality, he wanted to be an actor, he moved to New York and almost starved to death when he was, you know, we're talking about sixth grade and the hurtfulness and awkwardness. But when he was an immigrant from Germany, at one point when he got a vaccination, he ended up losing all the hair on his body. So everything that you know about Mike, he's worn a wig his whole life, or a toupee his whole life. And so imagine going through those awkward periods at that time and having a German accent and living in fucking New York. And when he first was becoming an actor, he was a brilliant guy, but his type and he just wasn't seeing any representation of himself on screen, and he really struggled to get a job. So it's a great story of, you know, if somebody wants to pursue this as a career, of just really understanding perseverance and how to adapt to what the industry is at the time, what it's looking for at the time, and also doing really honest self-reflection and realizing what you have to offer and what your talent is, and really focusing on that and going forward on that, and realize that it's fucking hard, and there's going to be a lot of heartbreaks, and he ended up, you know, rising to be one of the greatest directors of all time, but he didn't have that optimistic beginning. I mean, he got his ass kicked for literally the first half of his life. So I've been really enjoying that book right now.
Cool.
Anything you got?
Well, actually, no, I mean, no. Mostly I've been too busy to do anything fun. Daniel and I are finishing up the 9th book of The Expanse right now, which is taking up a lot of time.
How does it end?
Well, everybody dies.
Okay. And Amos gets shot in the dick.
Amos gets shot in the dick over and over again. And we're in production on season 6. So
I heard that.
Yeah, there's a lot of business going on with that. So I'm not getting to do anything fun. But it's funny that you mentioned that Mike Nichols tried to be a radio personality and then wound up a director. You know, Jeff Woolnough started out as a radio guy.
I did not know that.
If I remember correctly, and we can double check with him, but if I remember correctly, he was actually a radio news person.
Really?
Yeah, and then shifted into TV as a TV news like producer or something. I don't remember exactly what, and then from there wound up directing.
Is this before he met Norman Jewison?
You know, I don't know.
Well, he's showing up here soon because he might be directing a block or two. So I'll ask him about it when I see him.
Yeah. I may have gotten some details of the story wrong, but ask him, because it was interesting when he was talking about it, that the sort of weird path he took to wind up in directing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Directing is one of those things where people come from a lot of different places. You know, I mean, obviously some actors become directors, some writers become directors, editors, very commonly editors become directors.
Hal Ashby, one of the greatest directors of all time, started off as an editor. He edited In the Heat of the Night.
Yeah. And then of course, camera people become directors, DPs become directors. There's a lot of paths to it. And I don't know that any one is better than any other. I think knowing how to edit probably is super helpful.
Yes. That's it. That's a huge one. Yeah.
But at the same time, the actors that I've worked with who were directors who had started out in acting, they have a real insight into the acting process. That's actually really helpful too. So, I think no matter what path you take, there's interesting insights you wind up with.
Yeah. Sidney Pollack, I think, who's one of the great directors, but he started off as an acting coach. He tried to become an actor and then he became an acting coach, and then he went back to acting, and then he ended up getting into directing, and he's one of the great directors.
Yeah. And like James Cameron, he was a gearhead. He was really into all the gear, the cameras. He was really into understanding how cameras work and all that stuff. Worked as a visual effects artist, or not visual effects, special effects artist for years, and was really into, how do you shoot a special effect to make it look as real as possible when it's, like a model or whatever, and was really into this sort of technical aspects. Became one of our greatest action directors of all time. So, and
what I found is and what makes James Cameron unique is what I found as an actor is working with a bunch of, sometimes you come across a director who is like how you describe James Cameron now, who really understands the equipment, who really understands lighting, who understands camera, who understands editing, who really is focused on that side of the brain and knows what he needs to get and then move on. Then you have but they're not as great on the actual understanding of the story, what needs to happen in each scene, how to communicate with actors, and how to really communicate the context of the situation, what they need out of that scene and what that scene is about, and really focus on that. Or there's the directors that are very good at the performance side. They know how to speak to directors. They know they understand how to break down script and script analysis. They know what a scene is about. They know how to get the actors fighting for what they want in the scene, but they're not great on the technical and lighting and others. They really rely on their DP or rely on other people to handle that. The rare director is good at both sides, like the Elia Kazan or the James Cameron or the Mike Nichols.
Yeah.
And the visually do that. But should we get to the today's episode?
Yeah. What episode are we talking about? I don't even know anymore. I've lost track of.
Well, Ty, that's what I'm here for, buddy. So we are now on season 1, episode 7, called Windmills. And I think it's written by a mediocre writer named Ty Franck, and it was extremely gifted writer, Daniel Abraham. And together they're called James S.A. Corey. And
this is the first script we wrote for the show.
See, this is special. This is a special episode. The very first script that you guys wrote for the episode. And this is monumental. I'm really excited to really get into this now. And I will say before we go in, I'm really learning, or it's kind of being revealed to me as I'm going back and watching these episodes, how little I know about the show. I'm in the show. I've read the books, and I guess I get so focused on one character's journey and his point of view of the whole thing that all the other details and elements kind of they're not as bright as what's in front of that one character. And what's really been interesting is to go back and watch these episodes, and I don't think I've ever seen them. I thought I did, but I know I didn't see this one, and I know I didn't see the one that we did last week. So I'm able, because of time, because I don't know so much about all the other stories, and also because I have a terrible memory. I'm like, I'm one step above Guy Pearce in Memento. And so going back and watching these episodes, I'm really, discovering them for the first time and watching the first time. And I'm somebody that thought I knew what the show was about. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, how complicated is this show for somebody that doesn't, I'm in the fucking show and I'm trying to figure it out. And I think that's the beauty of it and how complex it is, but also like all the things that are set up and I know that happen down the road. So my point is, it's a pretty damn good show. Yeah. So you guys should check it out. We'll start with Miller, and Miller has just been fired from Star Helix, and we pick up and he is alone in the subway, and he's really dealing with the fact that he's been betrayed, that he's fired, and he's repeating the phrase that I used to be good at this, like trying to grab a hold of some last vestige of confidence in his dark soul. He's such a, my heart really breaks for him in the beginning of this episode. And then he reaches out to Julie Mal's father, Pierre Mal. And there's something I wanted to ask you. What does Pierre Mal know at this point? Like, how was he involved in the hiring of Miller to find his daughter?
Yeah. The idea there is that he just hired Star Helix to do it. And Star Helix is the company that runs security on series, and Earth Corporation that runs security. I mean, it's entirely possible, and in fact, I think very plausible, that Star Helix is owned by Jules Pierre Mal. You know, that it's one of the many, many companies that his giant organization owns. So he just, he sends a memo saying, I think my daughter's on series, have somebody grab her and bring her back. Miller just winds up getting the job.
Why did they choose Miller for the job?
Well, I think what becomes very clear in his dealing with his boss is that he was chosen because they know he's corrupt. Because, I mean, when she gives him the job, what he says is, a kidnap job. And she says, yeah, but it's off the books. And we see him in episode 1 of the show. He takes a bribe from a corrupt, landlord. I think that there's an expectation there that he's good enough to find some girl, put her in a black bag, and stick her on a spaceship to send her home to daddy.
Okay.
And he's not gonna kick up a fuss. He's not gonna make a deal out of it, and whatever money they pay him for that, because it's definitely implied in that scene that he's gonna get extra pay for it. Mm-hmm. Whatever money he gets for it, he'll just take the money and shut up. Mm-hmm. I think is why he's selected.
And so Pierre Mal might have said, okay, I need this to be taken care of, but I need to be taken care of quietly, because obviously it's connected to things that I don't want people to be poking their head around.
Doesn't want anybody looking into it. Yeah.
So Miller makes a decision that I'm going all in. I am now, the bridges have been burned behind me, and I'm now focused on figuring this out. My connection and my relationship to Julie Mal. This is the most important thing for me right now. He ends up going to the OPA bar. And when he goes there, he's got this renewed passion and vigor for what it is that he's trying to accomplish. And the great Jared Harris, so fucking great to see him on screen every time he comes on. But the great Jared Harris, and what I really loved about this scene is that Jared Harris's Anderson Dawes, and in some ways, by the amount and level of suffering that he's been through, is somehow enlightened. And it has that Buddhist kind of enlightenment of suffering. And he sees in Miller, you're almost at your bottom. Your false self is almost gone. And I'm seeing a passion and a vigor in you that means that you could actually be one of us. You could actually be a belter now that I'm seeing this within you, but you haven't lost it all. And you're still holding on to something. And when you do, the clarity of that loss and that pain and that suffering will reveal the truth. And then you might become a belter. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a scene that got kicked around a lot in the writer's room. And I know Mark Fergus, who wrote a lot of stuff for Miller in those early seasons, definitely had a strong take on it. Daniel and I wrote our version of it. I think Narain, kicked it around a little bit. So it was definitely a team effort to get that scene right. All of us sort of knocking the ideas around and getting it right. But really what sells it, as you said, the great Jared Harris, what sells it is Thomas and Jared. Just their performances are beautiful and heartbreaking. Thomas is heartbreaking because he's so, like you said, he's so close to bottom. He's so close to having nothing left. And Jared does this amazing job of playing it like a man who is genuinely reaching out a hand, saying, you're almost there. You're almost there. And when you get there, we'll be here for you. And at the same time, seeming like he's manipulating him. Somehow he plays honest and manipulative at the same time. And I mean, that's just the sign of a great actor. There's so many layers to what a great actor does in a performance. It's never just one thing. And that really is the difference between great actors and not great actors. Is great actors always have multiple things that they're balancing in a scene. There's never just one thing. There's always what they're saying, and then there's the thought process behind what they're saying, and then there's the thing that they're not saying. And all three of those things have to be played to really nail a scene and a performance. I'm lecturing you because you really need help on this. So,
and then
hopefully helpful to you right now.
Well, thank you for your class. Then he leaves there, and then he goes to Julie Mal's apartment. And what I find is an interesting writing and directing choice is that the way that he enters Julie Mal's apartment is representative of where he is in his character's arc and his journey, where he's going. Because the first two times he's methodically, using the car to get in the door and everything. At this point, he just breaks the fucker down. Like, he is now desperate. He's at the end of his rope, and he's searching that apartment again, which he's already searched, and he's trying to find some vestige of clue or something that he's just now ready to get, to find something that he can hold on to. And he's just about to give up, and then he sees the sparrow outside of his window, the sparrow that he saw outside of his apartment. And what does that sparrow symbolize?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it can mean a lot of things. I think what it sort of comes to symbolize over the course of the first season is the path to enlightenment. The first time he sees it is when he realizes that his corruption has made him a person he doesn't like anymore. And that's when he goes and he throws the landlord into the airlock and says, clean the filters. That's the first time. And then now he sees it when he's almost at his bottom point. And he seems to make that same kind of decision that I have to do something. I can't just be the guy I used to be. I can't just continue on the path I've been on. And it pulls him again. And he makes a huge decision in that episode after he sees the bird. And then we'll get to it in season 2, but the third time he sees the bird is also, it pulls him into a powerful and important decision in his life. And
there's a lot of, spiritual themes within this episode, the Buddhist of the suffering, and then, you're still holding on to one thing, and once that thing goes, you'll have a clarity, and then you come to me, and then, and you'll find your home at that point. And then he gets this visit from the sparrow, which is almost, it's almost like a sign, from Julie, like you're in the right direction, you're going the right direction, don't give up. And then he gets a call from Simatimba, his old partner, who is working on Eros, and Simatimba has checked into the Anubis, and the Anubis never got there, but the Anubis's shuttle, Anubis 1, is there. And that really lights a fire in Miller, because at this point, that could be where Julie Mal is. That's all the connection, and that's a big thing that he needs to go. And as he's walking out, he grabs her necklace. It's that thing. It's like, in Braveheart, William Wallace has that handkerchief, that he has with him, that symbol of that physical object that is the connection to the other person, and he grabs that necklace, that thing that represents who she is. And then so he can just be close to her, that he can have something close and to guide him on his journey going forward to looking for her. And then he does something that I think is really interesting, is he ends up taking the hat off when he leaves, and he throws it on the thing, and he abandons that hat. And the hat represents what you were saying earlier about his identity with connecting to Earth and the things of Earth, and working for an Earth-bound organization and corporation with Star Helix. And now he's letting that go and really embracing his true identity, which is more identifying with the Belter.
Yeah, that was a big part of the whole, there's this story of the hat. People always ask about the hat. Why did he have a hat? And the story of the hat is building up to that moment when he says, "Oh, I can let go of this now. This I don't need to pretend," because in a lot of ways, Jared's right. Anderson Dawes is right that Miller has been pretending to be something, and as you said, all of those pretenses have been stripped away from him. All the things that he told himself he was, that he really wasn't, are getting ripped off of him, and that hat is one of those things. It is a version of him that isn't real, and he's taking all the stuff that isn't real and he's throwing it away.
And what I love so much about this episode, and what I love so much about Miller's journey, is because that is what I believe is the true experience with anyone's life, is that there will always be that dark night of the soul when you think that everything that you think defines you, that gives you value, or everything that you put, I'm money or appearance or whatever, it all dies. all identity is mist in the wind. It eventually evaporates and nobody will ever remember, and so that has no meaning. And there's a deeper true self that is underneath that. And so you only get to connect to that true self once you allow everything to die. And it's painful. So what he's going through right now is kind of that rebirth, and he's going through that pain of who he thought he was and everything, and it's all dying. But he has that guide star of Julie Mao, that is his true compass and that thing that he's going for, because he knows heading towards that is where his truth is, where he belongs, where his home is.
And it's funny because all the things you just said are true, but again, that's not real. There is a story about what Julie is and who Julie is that he's following. Mm-hmm. And that story is not her. Mm-hmm. So he's still chasing this sort of unreal goal. And we don't see him abandon that until we get to the end of his journey.
Yeah.
He's still clinging to some.
But the thing within that mythology, it's not real. The world doesn't represent what his personal mythology, is in that situation. But what he's going towards and what he discovers is real. And so there's truth within that mythology, and the thing that he's resonating with, that's pulling him forward, that is real. And that's probably the only real thing in his life right now. And it's representative of the fact that Octavia, the one person that actually cares for him, the one person that keeps him completely from being alone and lonely in the world, is, she doesn't want him to leave. She wants to go with him. She wants to, connect. And he realizes that he cannot continue in this journey for something that is truthful and real if he brings her along, and he's just going to cause her suffering. That him being in Octavia's life is going to cause her suffering. And so he lets that go. He lets her go. And it ends with him on his way to Eros, with him holding Julie's necklace, in his hand. I'm really interested to see what the next chapter is in that story, because I don't remember.
And there's, again, you're talking about the symbolism and the spirituality of it. I mean, when we see him with the necklace, he's running it through his fingers like a rosary. Mm-hmm. Something very meditative and prayer-like about the whole thing. I do want to say, though, one of the things that people ask about, there's a moment there where Miller takes all the money that he's collected in bribes over the years, mm-hmm. puts it all in that sock, and takes it down mm-hmm. to the guy and trades it in for real money. Just a little technical detail for those listening is the little plastic things, that's not money. Those are casino chips. Because, as it is almost true now, all the money's electronic. When you pay for mm-hmm. things, you pay for them with your your phone or whatever. But the reason he has so many casino chips is because the black market runs on casino chips. The illegal activities run on casino chips, because the thing that is true of electronic money is it's very traceable. So if I buy mm-hmm. drugs with electronic money, or if I buy illegal stuff with electronic money, the government can trace that and, can help build a case against me. So what these guys do, there's legal casinos on the asteroids. These guys get these casino chips, which are basically money. They use that for all the black market and illegal activity. And then when you want to trade it in for electronic money, you trade in your casino chips for electronic money. It just looks like you won money at a casino. It doesn't look like you were doing illegal shit.
And I love that line, because they say, wow, you've been winning. He goes, nah, this is a lifetime of losing.
Yes.
When he cashes in those chips. And what I love about it, what I love about Miller's performance, is that in the beginning of the show, of season 1, and you kind of see him going through the motions. He's done this a million times. He's compromised. He's doing this. But now we've seen this rebirth where there's this energy and passion in him. And now he seems alive and animated for the first time, because he's now headed for something. He's headed for his spiritual center. He's headed for this mythology that he's created, that there is truth in, and he's allowing, his identity, the hat is the symbol of that, to dissolve, and he's headed for something else. And it's ignited him in a way that we haven't seen in the early performances, in the early episodes.
Yeah.
So now we're at the Roci, and we start off, and because of Diego's uncle throwing rocks at the Africanus, Mars is now monitoring all shipping lanes. And that is going to be a problem for the Rocinante, because it just happens to be a stolen Martian ship.
That's hard to explain. when the Martians pull you over.
It's like, you know what it is? It's like driving around in an active police car and then putting like the Domino's pizza sign on top of it, and and trying to explain like the stolen police car aspect of it, and which I think is it's a great story device. Now we feel the tension of this, and they're in this space where things are being monitored, and it's just a matter of time before they get pinged. During this process, when they realize that Mars is monitoring these shipping lanes and they're trying to figure out what to do, Alex comes across a signal that they're broadcasting from the Rocinante, and it's a mystery. Where the fuck's that coming from? And Amos ends up going down and finding our spy,
Kenzo,
played by Elias, and Amos begins to beat the fuck out of him, smashing his head, man. One of the things I was curious about, was Enzo in the books or was he created?
It's Kenzo.
Kenzo.
No, he's not in the books. He was created for the show. The worry that Narain had was that we needed a way to sort of dramatize the danger the Roci crew is in, flying around in this stolen Martian ship and with all these powerful forces looking for them. And we do that in the books. We do it more sort of narratively, but in the show, we needed some physical thing to happen to dramatize that. And so the spy Kenzo was created as sort of the physical embodiment of the danger that these guys are in, flying around in this stolen Martian ship.
And I thought that was really interesting because you find Kenzo, and we know that he is a spy that Avasarala is borrowing from, the person that she worked with. And so we know that she's working for Avasarala, but seeing the Roci crew try to figure out who he is, where he comes from, this whole thing of distrust, but seeing how good he is at lying, at manipulating. And Amos sees through it right away that this guy, nothing good is going to come out of this guy. And his ability to do calculations of that nature is so fast. And he's realized this guy needs to die. And one of the reasons that I really love that this episode is really kind of close to my heart is that we see Amos's philosophy for the first time when he explains to Kenzo about the churn, and that every way this game is going to end up, Kenzo's going to die. And I'm the one that's going to kill him. And I really love that scene between him and Kenzo. And also, we're starting to see a little bit of the stress between him and Naomi's relationship because she lied to him in the previous episode and didn't tell him about Holden. And she says to me to go check it out. And Amos hesitates before he goes checks it out. Me and you love horror movies. This has some horror movie because he notices Holden kind of flirting with Naomi, and he picks it up and he's seeing how that dynamic's changing. And also, nobody really knows at this point how fucking violent he really is and how much he doesn't care about their lives. And so they're kind of learning this at the same time. And it leads up to really one of the fundamental scenes between Amos and Holden in our relationship, and the kind of foundation that launches us to get to where we are now, where we realize at this point the Martians are going to board the ship. There's no getting around it, and Kenzo ends up proving to be useful by saying, listen, here's the protocol from the Martians. You guys are pretending to be the wrong thing. If you find these codes and you present these code words, maybe, just maybe, they'll give you a pass. But at this point, Amos realizes that we're too far down the road with that. So I'm going down to the airlock and I'm going to kill as many of these people that are born as we can, and we're going to try to escape and get out of here. And that seems like the right plan B. Well, Holden at this point is, this is not how he does business. This is not how he's not going to allow it. So he takes out his gun and he's pointed, and they're in a standoff because Amos is about to mow down these Mickey Martians, and Holden has a gun in the back of his head, which, by the way, he could have blown my head off if it was a real gun because his finger's on the trigger the whole goddamn time.
Holden has terrible trigger discipline.
Terrible trigger discipline. So I'm like, Jesus Christ, man, take your finger off the trigger. So he has his finger on the trigger the whole time, and he's going to blow my head off. And Amos is really betting on the fact that he doesn't think Holden has murder in him. Talk a little bit about that scene. Was that scene in the books?
No, it wasn't, because the whole sequence with the Martians isn't in the books. But here's the thing: is I think Amos's calculation is twofold. I think Amos thinks it unlikely that Holden will shoot him in the back of the head. At the same time, Amos would rather be shot in the back of the head than be taken to a Martian gulag. So Amos is going to shoot the Martians when they get on the ship, no matter what, because he doesn't want
Right.
to wind up in prison. If
Right.
Holden shoots him to stop him from doing that, well, he still doesn't wind up in prison.
Right.
You know, I mean, and you get that. You know, there's a scene later in season 4 where he's talking to Clarissa, and she says, "You set it up so I could space myself if I wanted to." And Amos says, "If I was looking at a lifetime sentence, I'd want the option." So I think it's very clear that Amos would much rather be dead than be put in prison.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, look, at the end of the day, if you were looking at a lifetime in prison or a bullet in the back of the head, what would you take?
Well, is it one of those prisons that has like conjugal visits?
Yeah, it depends on you. That's a good point. Let's think about like Oz, HBO Oz prison.
Oh, I don't want to be in that prison.
I'm taking a bullet in the head, buddy. You know? But if we're talking about Cool Hand Luke, Paul Newman's prison, I'd probably go to that instead of getting shot in the head. But because you're outside all day, you get to work, you got good buddies, good friends. So then we get to the famous donkey balls scene. And and what inspired this? I mean, is this a real practice that you've come across that in the military or spies or whatever, where they have a certain password, a code word?
It's complete bullshit. It's, you know, it was made up for the show. But one of the things we talked about is with so many ships flying around in the solar system of the Expanse, and with some of those ships almost certainly being up to, I mean, if you think about, like, even now, they'll have ships that look like fishing ships that are actually the ships for spies, right? You know, they're fishing in territorial waters, or they're fishing off the coast of somebody's territorial waters, and inside they're doing electronic monitoring and that kind of stuff. So certainly that sort of thing would be going on.
Mm-hmm.
And what we were talking about is, if you're a Martian patrol ship and you see a ship out where it's not supposed to be, how could they signal you, you know, that they're a spy without getting on the radio where everybody can hear and going, "Hey, we're spies." So this was the idea we came up with, that there would be code words that you could use in an otherwise seemingly innocuous message that would signal the other ship to leave you alone. Yeah, but it's, you know, it's just made up shit.
Yeah, but it was, you know, it's a really great scene. Alex was really good in it, and the whole donkey balls thing really took off. And and it was it's a lot of fun. So it was a great scene. Now we end with them coming to this mysterious rock where the last transmission from Lionel Polanski, and you know, I suspect we'll be getting into that next episode.
We will. Okay, so if we're done with the Roci piece, I have a funny story I want to tell.
Okay.
So this was in season 1, of course, and I was hanging around on set a lot and hanging around with Narain, and we'd gotten to the point where Narain and I pretty much just by episode 7 of the first season, Narain was just taking me everywhere with him to go to all the meetings and, you know, do all the production stuff. So I was kind of attached to him at the hip. We're all sitting, Narain and I, and I think maybe the director, I don't remember who all, but we're all kind of sitting in Video Village. And Ken Fisher, you know, Ken Fisher, who is now a associate producer on the show, in that first season, he was the EP's assistant, right? Mm-hmm. He was the producer's assistant. He was very diligent. But because we had written this character of Kenzo into the show, we started calling Ken Kenzo. So we were always, you know, like, "Kenzo, get us coffee," or whatever. So it was the filming of episode 7, and so Elias was on set too. And Narain and I are sitting in Video Village, and Ken Fisher comes up, and Narain yells out, "Kenzo, get us some coffee." And Elias hears this, and he goes, "Okay, how do you guys take it?" It was so, like, that's a Canadian actor for you. Like, an American actor, you yell at them to get you some coffee, they're just gonna tell you to fuck off, right?
Elias, you ass kisser, you going to go get the executive producer some coffee? Come on.
Well, I mean, obviously we explained that, you know, we weren't yelling at him, but yeah, so it was very sweet. I was excuse me, going through puberty, my voice is changing.
Congratulations. You got pubes?
Yeah, I'm getting hair in strange places.
Well, listen, there's some things that I need to talk to you about. So when a man and a woman come together, or whatever your preference, yeah.
Just stop now. Just stop.
Okay. All right. I was going to give you the birds and bees talk, but
Fun fact that I just read on the internet yesterday. Apparently,
yeah,
when male bees ejaculate, they ejaculate so hard it is audible. A human ear can actually hear them. Yeah.
that's
So-
amazing.
So there's some powerful shit going on there.
So how do we achieve that? Like, how do we experiment with that? Do they have some like? Do they have like a really nice like hand shaped tweezers that they can in order to measure the audibility?
So anyway, that's my Canadian actor story.
That deserve I think we should spend more time on that before we move on.
We'll get to a very special episode of the podcast.
Yes, we'll do a whole episode on bee ejaculation. Now we get to Christian Avasarala. And one of the great things about watching this show for the first time is I'm getting to discover how good Sheree is in this scene, and this is a highlight for her. And who directed this episode?
This was Bill Johnson.
Bill Johnson. The shot with her walking through the snow in that red coat, and her telling all the guards to stand back, whatever. It's so beautiful.
It's a beautiful shot.
It's a beautiful shot. And then, she goes and we get to see the great Frances Fisher.
I have such a crush on Frances Fisher and have since I was, this is the first time I ever saw her. I love redheads, and Frances is an adorable redhead. And the cool thing that happened while we were shooting this is she and I really hit it off and became quite friendly. And I got to hang out with Frances a lot. And just, talking about her amazing career. She was married to Clint Eastwood for a while. They have a kid together. All that's, her working on Unforgiven with Clint, where she played Strawberry Alice, all that. And I have a really funny story about that I can tell when you're ready for my funny Frances Fisher story.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because our top 5 today is going to be on Westerns, because The Unforgiven is probably my favorite Western of all time.
That's because it is maybe the best Western of all time.
It's the greatest Western. And I happen to be a massive Clint Eastwood fan. And she's got so many great stories. And also the history, I met Frances Fisher on the first real big substantial movie that I ever did was a movie called In the Valley of Elah.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I met Frances Fisher. And I just remember always admiring her, watching her work and going up and being able to work with her and meet with her. That was a great experience. How did the casting of Frances Fisher come about? Is it because Sheree and her are good friends, or?
I think that was part of it. I mean, she was, when we were checking availabilities for the character of Elise, she was on the availability list that the casting agents brought to us, said, she was available. And of course we all immediately went, well, Frances Fisher's fucking amazing. If we can get her, let's get her. But what this is a thing a lot of people don't know about how casting works. When you're looking for a specific character, you say we want this kind of person. The casting agents will bring you a list, right? Like, here's all the people who are available, and they have ones that they call tech avail, which is technically available but unlikely to get. So they bring you the list, and here's the ones you're likely to get. Here's the ones you're unlikely to get, but they all kind of fit what you're looking for. And there's always people at the top of that list that you're never going to get. There's always people that are like, this person is technically available right now. And it's like, it's Brad Pitt. No, Brad Pitt's not going to do a one-day part on The Expanse, right? But she was on the list. So we saw it and we're like, oh, she'd be great. It'd be amazing to get her, but it's unlikely. Then we found out that she's good friends with Sheree. And I don't know if we had Sheree reach out to her or she knew Sheree was on the show. And so when her agent brought her the offer, that made it more appealing. I don't know how exactly that happened. I wasn't that involved in casting at that point. Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, her friendship with Sheree, I believe, was a factor in us being able to get her. And what a win that was, because she's just great.
I mean, she really classes up the place when she shows up. Yeah. And the scene between the two, when both of them, when she knows that she's being bullshitted by Sheree, and they're reading each other and they're going back and forth. It's just great work. It's just two great actresses going at it. And it's phenomenal. And then you see the Don Quixote book, which ties into the title of the Windmills. But it also is a source of Holden's character, about him always tilting towards windmills and always kind of slinging his slingshot at Goliath. And we get to learn a lot about Holden. And one of the things that we learn is that he's had this great responsibility and sense of duty instilled in him as a young kid, that he was responsible for this land, and it was up to him for this whole family, all his mothers and fathers to keep up with this land. And Frances Fisher's character, his mother, realized that the kind of pressure they were putting on his shoulders, and she couldn't stand anymore, and she set him free. But Holden now has the guilt of letting his family down, the fact that he might lose his family. And that is a real understanding of what motivates him, this sense of duty and guilt and having to do the right thing and having to fulfill his duty, because at this time he might have abandoned the first duty he's ever had.
Yeah. And when we meet him in the first episode of season 1, he's running away from responsibility. He's still running away.
What I really love about this scene is that, Avasarala is there because she needs to understand Holden. She really needs to get in his head and understand what is motivating him, and if she can trust him, and is he a terrorist? Did he go to the other side? And while she's there, she's really bumping up against Frances Fisher's character. What's her name?
Elise.
Elise is, she's a match. She's met somebody that is just as sharp and just as intuitive as she is. So Avasarala uses her personal experience of losing her son to lower her guard, to connect to her, and to be able to get the information that she needs about Holden. And, that's the great thing about Avasarala, that crafty. I think she had a genuine moment of sharing this moment, but she knew why she was doing it, and she knew what she was doing when she was doing it.
I think she also very quickly comes to respect Elise. Mm-hmm. I think she sees her intelligence and her strength of will, and she sees sort of a kindred spirit there, that like they're both cut from the same cloth.
Oh,
I think.
There's one thing I want to ask you. So when Avasarala's on her way there, she refers to them as political fanatics.
Yeah.
What are their politics? What are they?
Well, I think what Avasarala is doing there is painting them with a very hyperbolic brush. They're not fanatics. What they are is they're farmers, they're ranchers. And they are trying to hold on to this big piece of land. And what they're doing is they're using loopholes in the law that allow them to keep more land than an individual would be able to keep in the system that exists in that future. And so what they've done is these 8 people have all married each other and only had one kid. And all of that was part of, manipulating these loopholes to hold on to this large piece of land. And so they're not fanatics. They're not separatists. They're not survivalists or some crazy thing like that. But they're clearly manipulating the system.
And how does that work? Is there more than one females in that group?
Yeah. In episode 3, Greg Brick, he says to Holden, he says 5 fathers, 3 mothers, because of the sort of the population limiting laws that exist on Earth. 8 people only having one kid between them. There's like tax breaks involved with that. And, so they're manipulating the system is what they're doing. And when she says, political fanatics, she's using a very negative attack to sort of get a rise out of Elise.
Then this reminds me of a story, but I'll tell at the end because we're at the end now. So now we get to know Holden. We get to know his mother and his family. And from this point, this was the first really getting in deep with Holden and who he is and where he's from. And you see this mother that he has that absolutely loves him, adores him. And you really kind of connect to Holden in a way. And then the very next scene, you find out that Ehrenreich has already dispatched assassins to fucking kill Holden.
Yeah, he sent out the hit squad.
Before we move on, I just want to say that Frances Fisher, like you said, is just great, man. Just a wonderful person. And we've really gotten to know her with her. And we were over at Noreen's house, who's our showrunner. And Frances Fisher told me about this town in Georgia that she lived in and that she fell in love with it. I'm from Georgia and I never heard of this town. I don't want to say the name because I like how small it is and how much land and how beautiful it is. But she told me about this town in Georgia. And when she told me about it, I said, I grew up there. I never heard of this. And so I ended up looking into it. And that's where I bought land. I'm building a house there. And she was the first one to tell me about it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Let me tell you my Frances Fisher story. We got in trouble. She and I got in trouble together. So Frances, as I said, as an actor, I'd always had a bit of a crush on her. when I finally got to meet her, what I discovered is she's actually just a really lovely person, intelligent, really charming and witty, very funny. I just liked hanging out with her. We had a great time hanging out on set. And it was when we were shooting the scene you're talking about, where Shorei's walking through the snow, and we had this huge crane shot of her going. It was a very elaborate thing happening down there. So Frances wasn't in that scene. Obviously, she's in the next scene where, Shorey knocks on the door and all that. So we're just sitting up on the porch of the house where we were shooting, because Frances is out there smoking. And we're just sitting up on the porch and we're just talking. And we're talking about Unforgiven. Yeah, how amazing it was to be on that film and shooting with her husband, her ex-husband Clint, and all that stuff. We get to the part where we're talking about the scene where the cowboy has been killed and his buddies come and they like start throwing rocks through the window of the bordello where Strawberry Alice and all her compatriots work. And she goes to the window and she yells back at them that they had it coming, right? And Frances is telling this story. And she's getting more and more excited as she's telling it. And she just yells out at the top of her lungs, "He had it coming. They both had it coming for what they did." And then just way off in the distance, we hear, "All right, back to ones." Just yelled right over the top.
She yelled at them while they're in the middle of the scene. It's funny that you mentioned Unforgiven, because our top 5 today, Ty, is the greatest Westerns of all time. In honor of Frances Fisher, who is in one of the greatest Westerns of all time, which is definitely in my top 5 list. And so I'll go through my list, which is the correct one, and then you can either agree with me or create your list, which will be the wrong one.
I'm going to guess that we have a lot of similar ones.
I think we have a lot of similar ones. I'm going to start with John Ford's The Searchers. And I'm going to start with it because, number one, it's a great Western, everybody, but what he did at that time, how he furthered cinema and the way that he shot it. Also the story and the John, I think this was before True Grit. So it was the first time John Wayne played the anti-hero in this way. It was just it's just a masterpiece. Just a masterpiece. I've already mentioned Unforgiven, which is probably my favorite of all time. I just think the timing of when it happened, also being directed and starred in by Clint Eastwood, who was the embodiment of the Western for so long, and him turning it on its head and basically kind of closing the door for the Westerns and what they were up until that point, and completely changed the game with the Unforgiven. I think that's why it deserves to be on the list. And I just fucking love Clint Eastwood. And then I'm going to have to go with Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. Everything just came together. The script, Robert Redford just really kind of coming to, it's hard to think of a time when Robert Redford was, where you have a hard time casting Robert Redford, but he was unknown at this time. He's only did Barefoot in the Park, which was, on Broadway. And then they came and they made a movie of it. But at this time, it was only Paul Newman. And think of the humility, somebody like Robert Redford coming in with George Roy Hill, who had directed Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. It was a William Goldman script, which is a masterpiece and one of my favorite writers of all time. George Roy Hill wanted to go with Redford, and the studio wouldn't sign off. And so he went to Paul Newman. Paul Newman met with Redford, really hit it off with him. And also the balls on Redford, because initially it was going to be Paul Newman playing the Sundance Kid, and they were looking for the guy to play, and he wanted to play the Sundance Kid. And Redford and Paul Newman saw his potential and hit it off with him. And he said, no, let's cast Redford. And then he made Redford what Redford is. And so, I love hearing those stories you hear so many stories about selfishness and insecurity and fear, but a truly generous actor like that, and Redford adored Paul Newman, till the day he died. And they had this great friendship. It was never competitive. It was really loving. And fourth, and you can argue against this one because it's a mini series. It's not a movie, but I count this in the thing is Lonesome Dove.
It's pretty great.
Robert Duvall and Tommy Lee Jones, their chemistry and the combination in the Larry McMurtry novel, Gus McCrae and Woodrow McCall, it's just two of the greatest iconic Western characters of all time, and they fucking crushed it. I can watch Lonesome Dove anytime, anywhere, the whole fucking miniseries. I just love it. They made me laugh. It's just beautiful. It's just so well done. And then this one is more of a personal one. And this is the one that I would probably have to argue, because I'm choosing this one over the Sergio Leone trilogies. I'm choosing this over High Noon. I'm choosing this over, a lot of really classic movies. But I just think this is as good as Westerns get, and it's as good as Clint Eastwood gets. And he also directed and starred in it, but the outlaw Josie Wells. And I just don't think it gets much better than that. And then that line at the end, when he says it's a living, he says, dying ain't much of a living. I mean, it's just gold. It's just gold. What you got, man?
I agree. All of your choices are top notch. I would say that Unforgiven's the greatest Western ever made. I think Outlaw Josie Wales is, I think they are two sides of the same coin. I think it's amazing that Clint made them both, because Unforgiven is a rebuttal to Outlaw Josie Wales. It's like he made Outlaw Josie Wales, and then 30 years later, he made the rebuttal to it, where Outlaw Josie Wales was all about the mythology of the gunfighter, and Unforgiven is all about demythologizing the gunfighter. That great sequence in Outlaw Josie Wales where Clint Eastwood shoots the 5 Confederate soldiers, and he talks about how he picked the order in which he was going to shoot them. The twitchy one in the back wanted to draw, so he shot him first. And then in Unforgiven, you have the writer character who says, "You just killed 5 men. An experienced gunfighter will shoot, the most experienced gunfighter first." And Clint Eastwood just says, "I was lucky in the order. I've always been lucky when it comes to killing." And just all the mythology goes away. He just takes all the mythology out of it. That the reason that he's a killer is not because he's faster or he's got some special knowledge. It's because he's cold-blooded and he's lucky.
The thing is he's lucky because he is cold-blooded. And the reality is that, so that, like with MMA fighters or boxers, they talk about those guys that are superstars in the gym, that there's people that have more talent than Muhammad Ali, and their skill and the how they understand the game and technical, but once they get under those lights, they just shut down. They're mentally don't know how to. Whereas somebody like Muhammad Ali, even later in his life, where he wasn't training as hard as he was when he was younger, he wasn't. But once he got under those lights, it just turned him on, and that's why he's the greatest boxer of all time and the greatest fighters of all time. And one of the things, like with an Audie Murphy character, like a true war hero or soldier, is that when people are under that kind of stress, people respond differently. And so you have that great moment where Clint Eastwood's characters with Morgan Freeman, and Morgan Freeman had his rifle, and he had that realization, that moment that he couldn't shoot him, and he's like, "Well, I'll do it." But he wasn't this 007 character. Like, he was clumsy, he was a pig farmer, he's not even good at it and everything like that. But when it came to killing, it activated him, and it really tapped in. And what's so great about that is you see how the world treats him as this sloppy pig farmer. He fucked around with Gene Hackman, which is a true sociopath in this movie. And then they were unaware that he had this superstar murdering talent that's hidden within him. And after he gets his ass kicked and he goes through his pneumonia and he has his, revelation, he comes through and sees that they're decorating, their bar with the body. And these guys that have basically ruled with just bullying tactics and ruled with an iron thumb, and they beat the hell out of the great Richard Harris in the beginning. And he comes in and he murders all those motherfuckers. And it's just so good. It's just so good.
You just shot an unarmed man. Well, he should have armed himself. He's going to decorate.
And that's true. And then, and it's kind of like what Gene Hackman has the conversation with the writer in the cell. And he says, "You want to see how fast I can draw?" And he pulls, he goes, "This is how fast I can draw." Because the whole thing is like, who's the fastest in the West or something like that. He's like, "I'm not fast. I'm not even coordinated. I'm not even a really good shot." But when it comes down to when you're actually really going to murder somebody, I stay calm and I'm focused on what it is I'm going to do. And that puts me in the 99th percentile of murderers. So good. So good. Any other ones you want to add to the list?
The one I'm surprised you didn't mention is Tombstone. Val Kilmer's best role ever.
If the third act in Tombstone was as good as the first 2 acts, it would for sure.
Yes, there is a huge third act problem with Tombstone.
Yes, I thought about Tombstone because everything, like the first two acts is definitely in the top 5 greatest Western everything, but the third act, it just kicks it out of the thing. I mean, no, and he's going through the river and shooting it, that's where it kind of loses me. So
ending your movie with a montage is a bad idea.
It's a bad idea.
But the third act still has the confrontation between Johnny Ringo.
You and I think so much alike because you're literally taking what I was going to say next, the third act, and I was going to go with the no. But what redeems it as a watchable experience is the showdown at the end when Val Kilmer shows up for his friend, and it's a beautiful moment. But if Tombstone's on TV, I'm going to watch the first 2 acts and then I'm out. And then I might jump back in on that last thing. And so it can't be, whereas if Unforgiven's on, I'm in through the long haul. I'm watching the whole thing. And so Tombstone as a whole isn't as effective as these other movies that we mentioned. And to make it into a top 5 of greatest of all time, you got to be firing on all cylinders. You can't have any weak points.
Well, then the other one that I would put on that list for me is Silverado. I can watch Silverado anytime it's on. I love Silverado. It's a fantastic movie. The spaghetti westerns, I was a big fan of the spaghetti westerns like you. But the one that I think is my favorite.
Once Upon a Time in the West?
Once Upon a Time in the West. That opening scene with "You brought too many horses."
Yes.
Charles Bronson in that movie, that's a bad motherfucker right there.
Bad motherfucker. And Once Upon a Time in the West was an honorable man. It was so close, but although Josie Wells just pushed it out. And see, the thing is you got to look at it as a whole, because there's moments in Tombstone, or there's moments in Once Upon in the West, like the opening scene, that's better than anything. That is, top notch. But as a whole, how it all works together. And God, that's such a good movie, such a good example.
I'm also, and I don't know if I have 5 yet or not, but I'm also a huge fan of the Coen Brothers remake of True Grit.
Yeah,
I thought Jeff Bridges as Rooster Cogburn was amazing, and it's a more accurate depiction of the book.
The book,
yeah, they did it more accurate to the book. But I think I think that's a beautiful movie.
I love True Grit, I do, but I think with Coen Brothers, No Country for Old Men, if I'm going to look at, because I consider that a Western, and Cormac McCarthy, and I just think that would be my favorite Coen Brother Western is No Country for Old Men. And Brolin, I did this, I did the movie I mentioned earlier with Francis Fisher, In the Valley of Ella. Josh Brolin was in that movie, and he was great to me. And I had great conversations with him. He's a true film scholar, true student of the craft. And, he was just getting to the point, because at that point, he had a really red hot career when he was younger. And then he kind of was finding himself for a while and finding his voice. And then he went to New York for 5 years and just disappeared and just dove into doing theater, just really studied the craft, just doubled down on learning the craft and really coming back and offering something. And then he's coming back, and I met him on him building himself back up and building his career back up. And so we did In the Valley of Ella, and in between I went to the premiere. So, I went to the premiere of No Country for Old Men. I just thought, I was just blown away by it. I just thought it was so good, firing on all cylinders. And I thought he, in particular, was really good. And Tom Lee Jones was there, and he was also in the Valley of Ella. And so it's kind of like this kind of connection. And then the next experience I had is I worked on this movie called W. And so Brolin went, because he focused on the craft, and kind of going back to the Mike Nichols books of what I'm talking about, is really doing honest self-evaluation, really defining what your talent is, what you have to offer the industry, or what you have to offer in terms of what you want to do, and focusing on that. And that's kind of what Brolin did. And then the next movie we did was W, where he was the guy. He was the main guy in the film.
I have no memory of you being in W. I've seen that movie multiple times. Who did you play in W?
It was a smaller part. I was playing the guy hazing him in college.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I did not remember that.
Yeah. So Oliver Stone, his offices were close to Paul Haggis, and Paul Haggis directed In the Valley of Ella. And Oliver Stone saw In the Valley of Ella, and that's how I met Oliver Stone. And then I read for him for a project called Pinkville. It was a Vietnam thing that he was going to do, and it was right after In the Valley of Ella. And then from there, he called me in to be a part of this like hazing, thing of hazing George Bush and this fraternity and all this thing. And so I remember showing up to the rehearsal, and Brolin was there, and a few of the other guys were there that were in the sorority. And so we were singing all the college songs, and he had like piles of research of those colleges and those kind of secret societies and all these kids that are, basically their parents run the world and they know they're going to run the world after. And then so he's like getting us into hazing, and we're hazing, and so he goes so we were kind of going around, and I think he might have had one or two puffs before we started, and we were kind of walking around Brolin, and we're singing the song, and he goes, fucking haze him more, go more, and then he goes, hit him. And I was like, what does he mean? He wants me to fucking hit him? Like, what does he mean? And he goes, fucking hit him. So I rolled up the songs, the papers of the songs, and I wrote up and I smacked Brolin on top of that, and he goes, yeah, fucking smack him. And then I really got a sense of how Oliver Stone works, and I've heard these stories before. So we did that, and he really was like, this was great, and the energy and the vigor, he did a good job. And so then I felt so like calm, like so good that, wow, Oliver Stone, a filmmaker that I've always admired, and I get to do this part in this film. And, it was early on in my career. And so then we show up on the day, and we're doing the scene, and we kind of go through the rehearsal of the walkthrough, and he goes, hey, can I talk to you for a second? And I was like, yeah. What's going on? And he goes, are you sick? And I was like, no, I'm not sick. Feel good. And he goes, did you have a long flight? Were you like tired from the flight? And I was like, oh, wow. What the fuck's going on? Because you just seem tired. He goes, you just don't have the same energy that you had when you first did the scene. And then I was like, oh, fuck. And I started worrying about it. So then we did the scene again, and he came back and goes, you sure you're okay? You're not sick or anything like that? And then at that point, I'm like, I'm going to fucking flip this whole set over, and I will yank, bro. I will put, because he was in a barrel of ice, and I was like, I will drown him in that fucking ice before he says, like, I'm not doing it again. The next scene, I was like, just an asshole. I mean, like fucking breaking golf clubs and screaming and fucking, just doing whatever I had to do. And afterwards, I kind of saw it in his eyes, like, and he just was fucking with me the whole time to get their performance and to get the realism, the ruthlessness of these guys and how they hazed each other and everything. And so that's kind of how he worked, and that's how that scene played out with doing that. But yeah.
Well, that's good to know. Good to know that works on you.
Yeah, it does.
If you see me on set and I go, hey, are you feeling okay?
Are you sick?
You'll know that I want you to break something.
I'm like, no. Why do you say that? No, I feel great. And that's the thing I kept answering. No, I feel great. I had breakfast, and I've been drinking water. I'm hydrated. Yeah, what's going on? All right. Well, this was a great episode. We did season 1, episode 7. Next week, we're going to do season 1, episode 8. And thank you for hanging out with us. And, let us know what you think. Let us know in the comments. Like and subscribe. You can go to tyandthatguy.com. You can let us know on the comments in YouTube. And we will continue to complete the whole series. And this has been fun. And thank you guys for coming out and hanging out with us. You want to say bye, Ty?
Bye, Ty.